Okay, and over to you, Daniel. Thank you so much for coming today, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Let me just share my screen. So get my slides up. Okay, so everybody can see that, I hope.
Yeah, looking good.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, as Ben said, my name is Daniel Mills. By day, I'm a university professor here in Japan, but I've been investing in real estate in my home country in the United States since 2014. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience and also give you almost a step-by-step guide of how I would start, maybe if I was doing it over again. So as I said, I'd like to start with my story because for me, this is what really inspired me when I started off with real estate investing in 2014. It was listening to other people's stories. There's a lot of great podcasts out there, and there's many people that agreed to even mentor me. And hearing those stories, gave me great ideas of what I wanted to do, but also, the inspiration to get through some of the tough times, and of course the advice along the way. So I made this little graph here, which tells you a little bit about my life in Japan. So I didn't come to Japan until I was 28 years old. That was in 2006. I really floundered a lot in my 20s. It took me until 28 to graduate from university. So I came to Japan right after graduating from university. I didn't have any money except for the money I had from selling a car before I left, but I had $20,000 in student loan debt, which is quite, actually not that bad compared to many Americans. I had no idea about anything to do with money, but I knew I had to do something. So I picked up a book that was called The Idiot's Guide to Getting Rich. And as silly as that title seems, it was actually a great book. And it took you step by step for building your financial base. Some of the items I have there on the bottom: how to pay off that high interest debt, establish an emergency fund, invest in index funds, many of the things that, of course, were probably touched on in the earlier sessions, but then also growing your career so you can grow your salary. And then they finally move into, after you've done that, then you might want to consider real estate investing or investing in a business. And so that was always my idea. So as you can see on the top, I also got married. I earned a master's degree. I earned a doctorate degree. And I was able to achieve financial independence around early 2020 through mostly real estate investing, but also some of the other, index fund investing and other things that have probably already been covered. One thing I want to point out is that many people, they hear I'm a tenured professor and they think, well, your salary's high. That's how you can invest in real estate. But I invested in 2014 while I was still a contract university lecturer. And with the small amounts that were needed to actually get into it, I could have started much earlier. I just didn't have the knowledge and I didn't have the financial base yet. So my real estate investing really has three phases. And I want to tell you about it just so you understand the different ways that you can invest in real estate. I started off, like many people, investing in single family homes. And I chose three markets. And each one of these markets had a different goal in mind. The first market was Boise, Idaho. Many people hearing Boise, if you're not familiar, might think, wow, that's kind of backwoods. Why would that be a great appreciation play where I'm looking the capital gains there? Well, Boise is one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. It actually just got ranked as the third most unaffordable city in America. That includes Canada. So the prices have appreciated incredibly since I started investing there. In Memphis, Tennessee, I targeted cash flow. They have great jobs market with FedEx there. There's a very large port, but the prices don't go up very much, but you can get very good cash flow. And finally, I look for markets that are hybrid. So they have an appreciation aspect as well as a cash flow aspect. And the one for me has been Huntsville, Alabama, which is actually one of the headquarters of NASA. It's where the rocket center is, where Space Camp is. Again, something people don't know about very often, but it's a great market. After building my single family portfolio, I wanted to get into commercial real estate. So commercial real estate is defined as for residential above 4 units, so 5 units and above, or other types of real estate like self-storage or industrial. So I found partners to do that. And I think this is a really good lesson. If you don't know something, you can find people to team up with. So I found 2 partners through Bigger Pockets, which is the website I think I talked about earlier. One was a real estate attorney in Japan, so he's very knowledgeable, and the other is a commercial lender in Hawaii. And we became friends and we started to invest. And the first investment we made was quite a large one. It wasn't our plan, but we ended up buying 19 duplexes in one portfolio in Huntsville. I had the connections, so I brought the connections while these other individuals were kind of the experts. And we got this owner financed. So you don't even need to go through a bank to buy real estate. That's one of the most incredible things. You know, we found an owner that his family had owned these properties for over 100 years. He wanted to get rid of them. He had moved to an island somewhere. And so he agreed to finance the properties for us. Based on that experience, we were able to buy a brand new 12-plex building in Huntsville, which we did get bank financing for. Now, at that point, my path with my partners kind of diverged. They wanted to start something called syndication, and this is another way to invest. What they do is they find these great commercial real estate investments, usually very large ones, multi-millions of dollars. And then they do all the legwork. They find out everything. They put the earnest money down, and then through an equity, so you have to do this with a lawyer, you're able to raise money from investors to buy these properties. And usually the investors own 80% of it, and the general partners, the people that started it, own about 20%. And they decided they wanted to do that. I was at a point in my career where I said, I want to actually slow down a little bit. So I went the other direction. I became a passive investor in these types of syndications. And that's what I've been doing for the past year. I've been investing in multifamilies, like large apartment buildings in different parts of the country. And I've also started to focus on things like industrial investing or storage investing so that I have more diversification. It's not just all residential property. So a lot of people ask me, I've lived in Japan for 15 years. I do own my home here, and they say, well, why don't you invest in Japan? Now, I have nothing against the Japanese market. Every market has pros and cons, and it's going to fit your goals. Certain markets are going to fit your goals better than others. But I think there's a couple of key points that made investing in the United States the best decision for me. The first, and this applies to American citizens, is the access to financing. So many people know, even if you're not a US citizen, that even if we live abroad, we have to file our taxes every year in the United States. And it's a real pain in the butt. But one of the great things about it is that you are now eligible for the government-backed financing for properties, not just your own home, but rental properties. You can actually get up to 10 of these Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans if you're a US citizen. Now, if you're not a US citizen, there are ways to still get financing. There are types of commercial loans, but it's not quite as good. And so as an American citizen, this is one of the things that really drove me. The other thing is cash flow plus appreciation. So in the Japanese market, for example, it's mainly a cash flow market. We don't see any or much appreciation at all. But in America, not only do you see appreciation in the prices of properties, and not just in the big markets, but all the markets, if you're picking the right ones, we also see appreciation in the rent growth. So year over year, your mortgage is staying the same, the prices are going up, and the rents are going up. So this was a key factor. And the final one, which I'm not going to touch on too much, is the tax benefits. Because up until last year, there was an incredible tax benefit that came from owning properties specifically in the American market, because the loophole had to do with the price of the structure versus the price of the land. And in the US, the structure price is worth usually about 80% of the total value of a property. So there was a loophole in Japan where we were able to depreciate all of that structure value in 4 years directly off our taxes. Now, there's still a lot of tax advantages that are there, so it's still a great benefit, but it's definitely not as good as it was from 2014 till 2020, where I was using it. So for the next part, as I said, I wanted to give you kind of a step-by-step guide of how I would start over. And what I wanted to do is give you a property, a real property that I bought as the example. And that's what we're going to use throughout. So the reason I picked this property is it's the last direct property I bought. So as I said, I've invested passively in some syndications last year, but this year, but in last year, in 2020, in December, I bought this property, which was a new construction duplex. Duplex means there's 2 apartments with a purchase price of $220,000. And I actually bought this with a partner. So once again, I was at a point where I utilized a lot of my money. I thought, well, I don't have the money to buy that myself, but you can bring a partner on to do something like this with you. So there's so many options. Now, the way we got this, and before I go into the steps, I want to tell you a little bit about this, but real estate is really a relationship game. I mean, that's the thing that I've learned over and over. So by establishing myself in this market of Huntsville, Alabama, making good connections, sending presents to people that help me close deals, bringing partners on of my real estate agent, for example, all of these things lead to these opportunities. And what happened here is that my real estate agent, who builds usually very high-end homes, had bought some land, and he told me about it. And I said, hey, could you build me and my partner a duplex on there? And he said, yeah, I think so. Let me get the plans together. He came up with this price of $220,000. We then went to a property manager in the area and we said, well, what could we get for rents? And they said, well, $1,100 aside. So that's $2,200 total. And so there's a little rule of thumb that we use in real estate, the 1% rule. It's not foolproof, but if you have a property that's worth a certain amount, $220,000, and the rents you're going to bring in on a month-to-month basis are 1% of that purchase price, you probably have a good deal. So we jumped at that, brand new building. We couldn't find ones that were already constructed for such a great price. So moving on to the steps. The first step that I usually tell people is that you have to establish a financial base before you start investing in real estate. And these are all the things you've already learned through RetireJapan. Pay off your high interest debt, establish an emergency fund, not just for your personal use, but now if you're going to invest in property, you have to establish an emergency fund for those properties. I keep 6 months of expenses for every property I buy. And then, I like to invest in index funds as well to give me that diversity and to give me that base of my financial base so that I feel really secure. You need to make sure you're adequately insured, life insurance, health insurance, all these things need to be taken care of before I start looking at real estate. And finally, you need to establish an estate plan. This is especially important, I find, for Americans because we have to deal with both jurisdictions. I won't go into too much detail, but I had almost a horror story trying to work with lawyers in the United States and Japan to get something that worked for both sides. But it's something that you can do, and it's definitely something you should do if you have a family. Now, the next step, there's actually 2 steps that are interchangeable. I've labeled it 2A as select a market and 2B as decide on a strategy. And the reason these are interchangeable is that one could precede the other. So let's say, for example, you're an American, you have parents that live in Seattle, Washington, okay? And you've decided, I want to invest in Seattle, Washington. I know the area, my parents can help out. That's what I want to do. Well, you've selected the market, but now you have to have a strategy that fits in. Seattle, Washington is a very high cost of living area. It might be very hard to do a long-term rental with a property in Seattle. but you may be able to do a short-term rental or a furnished rental that I'm going to talk about in a second. The other could also be true. You might decide, listen, I want to do short-term rentals. I want to have vacation rentals on Airbnb. That's what I want to do. Well, the market is going to dictate that strategy is going to dictate the market you choose then. In that case, you're going to want to probably go to a resort market, or you may want to go to a market where there's just a lot of demand for shorter term rentals, like from traveling business people, for example. So these are sort of interchangeable. Now, when I do look at market, I look at certain key metrics, and I have to recommend there's a course on Udemy called I think it's Full Focus. I have to look that up. I might give it to you guys later, but it's a free course and it teaches you how to analyze markets. And it's a great way to go. So I look at things like jobs, population growth, crime. You want to look at landlord tenant laws. So Seattle, Washington, like I just mentioned, is very tenant friendly. If you have a tenant in there that you need to evict, you're going to have a very hard time. Huntsville, Alabama is very landlord friendly. So these are going to affect where you invest, things like taxes. And then on a smaller scale, the convenience of the property, the walkability, if that's the type of market you're looking at. When it comes to strategy, I'm mainly a buy and hold investor, which means I buy properties. I'm looking at long-term cash flow and appreciation. I'm not really going to sell those properties ever, maybe far into the future. Another strategy that's used by a lot of people, and I've done this myself, is called a BRRRR. BRRRRs stands for buy, rehab, rent out, refinance, and repeat. And this is a great strategy if you only have a small amount of money to invest. What you do is you buy a property that's really run down, you fix it up, but instead of flipping it, which is the next strategy, to a buyer, you actually rent it out and then you refinance it, and you're able usually to pull out all of your initial investment so you can repeat over and over again. As I mentioned before, short-term rentals and furnished rentals can really work well in high cost of living markets. And the final thing I wanted to touch on in strategy is the class of property. Real estate investors often talk about A, B, or C class. A class are your top of the line new properties. That's where professionals are renting. C class is going to be more of a working class neighborhood. You can do well in all of these. And of course, you have higher cash flow in the working class neighborhoods compared to the professional neighborhoods. However, you might have more turnaround or more financial issues with the tenants. Once you've picked the market and the strategy, then you need to work on building your team. Now, there's a guy named David Green. He's very famous for long distance real estate investing. He wrote a book on it, and he says there's a core four. You need a property manager, a real estate agent, you need a lender, and if you're going to be fixing up the properties, you need a contractor. I always start with the property manager. He starts with a real estate agent. He's a real estate agent himself, so maybe he has a little bias. But I like the property manager because I feel they're going to be the most honest with you. They are the ones that are going to be watching that property, be managing that property for you for the long run. So I usually get the best information from them. And I use a referral system. So once you find a great property manager, you get a referral. Who is their top real estate agent? Who is their top lender? And you work from there. Once you have your team, you're going to start identifying and analyzing properties that are going to be sent to you by your real estate agent, or you can find in different ways as well. You need to establish a criteria. What are you looking for? One thing that drives real estate agents crazy is if you tell them, just find me a house that's a good rental. They want specifics. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Which neighborhoods? What type of price point? And then once you do that, you have to analyze. You need to know, what is the cash flow of these properties? What is the cash on cash return? And you need to not forget about unplanned expenses. Many people will look at a property, they'll look at what the mortgage, maybe the taxes and insurances, and then what the rent is, and they'll say, wow, that makes some money, that's good, I'll buy that. What they don't realize is that you have to account for things like vacancy, maintenance, capital expenses, like a new roof. All of those need to be accounted for. And the way that I do that, very simply, is this sort of 4-square method. So again, we're going back to that duplex that I bought with my partner. we were quoted that it was going to have rents of $2,200 a month. Didn't work out. We ended up getting $2,095, but it's still pretty good. We're about $100 off. I put these other type of income up there. We don't get that, but I wanted to show you the other incomes you could get. Maybe you have a laundry on the premises, or you charge for pet fees or things like that. Then we come to the expenses. Now, this PITI acronym is used quite often in real estate investing, and it refers to your mortgage, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So it's usually bundled together in America. And our PITI is $1,015. We pay our property management about 10% every month of the gross rents. So they get about $200. And then those miscellaneous expenses I talked about, the vacancy, the maintenance fees, all of these type of things, we add that in about 15% extra. And we may not use that every month, but we keep it in a bank account ready for when those expenses come up. So you have a total of expenses of $1,515. So to get cash flow, I take my income minus the expenses, and we get $580 a month. So, that sounds pretty good for us. We looked at that, but really, to know what that means, we have to look at the cash on cash. Because if I'm putting down $1 million to get $580 a month, that's not a very good deal. But to buy this property, we bought it with a loan. We put down $60,000. That includes the down payment and the closing costs and taxes and all of that. And we're earning a yearly basis. Our cash flow is $6,960. So that's 11.6% return on investment. So many people, when they see this, and if they're an index fund investor, they say, well, that's pretty online with index funds. So why would I want to invest in real estate? This is much more trouble. And that's where financing and some of the other returns on investment come that I think are really important. So as I said, financing, if you're an American, it's one of the best things you can do is to get conventional financing on properties. But if you're not, there's a lot of other ways to do it. We have commercial financing. There's private lending. I've actually done that myself, where I've lent money to people for a certain rate of return. I had one private lending deal where I was getting a 12% return on the $100,000 I lent to them, right? So you can make a lot of money like that, but you can also use it to your advantage. There's partnering. I won't go into hard money, but it's a little similar to private lending. You can partner with people, as I said. You can get partners that can help you with the down payments, and you can raise money in syndications, though you have to keep in mind, you have to do that legally. You're raising money as an equity, so you need the legal documents to do that properly. So, as I said, we finance this property, and I want to show you how powerful leverage is in real estate investing. And I think this is the key of where I think it beats a lot of other investments, even though there are more troubles associated with it. So if we bought that property all cash, it would have been $220,000 out of pocket, $25,000 in rent, our expenses, taxes, insurance, property management, miscellaneous, about $9,000, and we're cash flowing about $16,000 a year. You get a cash on cash return of 7%. It's pretty good. I would still like that deal, but what happens when we finance it? So we ended up getting a 30-year fixed mortgage. It's fixed for 30 years. It's a great thing about the United States. And we got it at a 3.5% interest rate, which, especially when we're in an inflationary environment like this, it's almost free money. We put down $60,000 a year. We get the same rent. Our expenses go up because we have a mortgage. So we're talking about $18,000 that we're paying in expenses. Cash flow, of course, goes down. So it's down to $6,900 instead of that $17,000 that we had before. But our return, our cash on cash return, goes up to 11.6%. Okay. So you're getting more of a return because you're putting down less money. But you're getting still a very good cash flow from that. But we're not done yet. So I swear I didn't cherry pick this property. It was just the most recent I did. But you can see how incredible the returns actually end up being in the year that I've owned it. So not only are we getting that cash flow of almost $7,000 a year, but because we have our tenants paying our debt, they're actually paying down $3,000 a year towards our principal. So that means we're gaining $3,000 a year extra from them paying off that principal on our mortgage. And because we're in such an incredible market, but also because I chose a very good market, I saw $40,000 of appreciation that year, the first year. It's not normal. It's not what I usually count on, but that's what we got in the first year. So in the first year, our total returns were $49,960, 83% return on investment. Some people will say, well, yeah, but you can't touch that debt pay down. You can't touch the appreciation. You can refinance your properties. You can use a home equity line of credit. And that's what I've done to continue to build beyond those single family houses into the commercial real estate. But because I knew some people might say, well, this is just a great example, I went back to my entire portfolio. I looked at all of my properties I owned directly, not the syndications, not my commercial real estate, but my houses, my duplexes that I bought directly. The total average returns cash on cash was 11.1%. And my appreciation since 2014, the average appreciation has been 277%. Again, absolutely fantastic market. Is this going to go in the future? No, probably not. I count on 4% appreciation a year. But the cash on cash is why it's so important to buy cash flowing properties, not just ones that are going to appreciate. So step 6 is what I find to be the fun step, right? Once you've built this portfolio of properties, now we manage them. Maybe the managing is not so fun, but the optimizing is great. So the management is things like bookkeeping. I keep records, Excel sheets, of all my properties. I know how much money is coming in and going out every month. And my property manager sends me income and expense sheets. I communicate with my property manager every once in a while. It's not every week or every month. It's usually when things pop up, when there's a new tenant that is going to be moving in or something like that. One thing that's really important, though, to remember is that with real estate investing, you have to prepare for challenges. And I'm going to touch on that in the next slide. But, the great thing about index funds is that you can invest and you can forget about it. If you are not somebody that can deal with these challenges as they come up, it's probably not the best investment for you, or you need to pick a strategy that's low anxiety. But here's the great thing. Once you have these properties, you can refinance them. You can do these home equity lines of credit and continue to build. And you can even do things like consider changing strategies. Maybe you have a long-term rental that you want to turn into a short-term rental, get more cash flow from it. There's always things you can do. And I probably drive a lot of my real estate friends nuts talking to them every week or every month about all the different strategies we could go through. Now, before I end, because I painted a pretty rosy picture of real estate investing, I want to tell you about some of the disasters. As I said, there's a lot of challenges for real estate investing. I've had 2 houses burn to the ground since I started investing in real estate. But even there, my insurance covered the complete rebuild of the property and also the rents that I lost during that period of time. So it wasn't as bad as you would think. But there were fires. During the eviction moratorium, even in some of the really landlord-friendly markets like Huntsville, Alabama, we had an impossible time evicting a tenant. We had one guy who decided he wanted to game the system. He told everybody he had COVID, and we found out through family members that he didn't have COVID, but it stopped the eviction process because of the situation. And so I had somebody living in my property for 6 months. When he got out of my property, we found a person that was squatting in the property. Luckily, he left after being told that he couldn't live there. These type of things come up. And once you build a bigger portfolio, you can weather them better because you have more cash flow coming in. You don't worry so much about this one property that's not doing very well. But if this had happened early in my career, I probably wouldn't have continued. So these are important things to remember, but it's also important to establish your financial base so these things don't hurt as much as they could. So I'm going to end it there and open for questions. I just want to say thank you. I have my email address. I'm very happy to talk to people about real estate as much as they'd like or help you make your first investing. I do have two little plugs to make. I have a Facebook group called Investing from Japan. I started it with a friend of mine named John Gorham. We really were focusing a little bit more on the American side because obviously Retire Japan does a great job, but focused more on sort of expats from other countries. And John and I have also started a podcast that is not available yet, but should be available soon. It's called Expat Fire Club. And so if you're interested, especially in real estate investing, that should be coming up shortly. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Daniel. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we'll move on to questions.